The meeting of the Montana Public Service Commission is now in session. The time is 9:30 a.m. The date is November the 5th, 2019. We are in the Bollinger Room of the offices of the Montana Public Service Commission in Helena, Montana. Here with us today, Vice Chairman Lake, Commissioner O'Donnell, Commissioner Pinocci will join us shortly, and I believe Commissioner Koopman, do we have you on the phone with us? Hopefully, Commissioner Koopman will be joining us by phone. At this time, I'd ask you to all rise and join in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you all.
Now, we will, as is our custom, offer an opportunity to anyone who wishes to make public comment before the commission to do so at this time. Is there anyone who wishes to make public comment? Seeing none, we will move on to the agenda, beginning with action items. And item number 1 is approval of minutes from the previous meeting.
Move to approve.
Second. Been moved and seconded. We approve those minutes. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Commissioner Koopman, are you with us? Motion passes unanimously. We move on now to work session number 1, which is the annual pipeline safety rulemaking issue.
Good morning, Commissioners. As you're probably aware, the subject of this work session is our annual amendment of our pipeline safety rules to match with federal regulations. We do this, so I'm told, every year annually about this time to ensure that our rules match with what the Department of Transportation has enacted at the federal level. We're requesting approval to publish notice of the rulemaking and also requesting approval to finalize the rulemaking if during the procedure we don't receive any public comment.
Is there a motion to that effect?
Mr. Chairman, I would move we follow staff's recommendation.
Is there a second? Been moved and seconded. We adopt staff recommendation. Is there discussion of the motion? Hearing none, call the question on the motion. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Motion carries unanimously. Thank you, gentlemen. Number 2, the exempt pay increase under House Bill 175. Ms. Hinman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. The purpose of this work session is to request approval to provide a 50-cent increase in base pay effective on the first day of the pay period that includes January 1st, 2020, and the first day of the pay period that includes January 1st, 2021, for the 4 exempt positions. Funding for these increases are in our House Bill 2 budget for all staff, but commission approval is required in order to apply the increases to the 4 exempt positions, which are Communications Director, Regulatory Division Administrator, Chief Legal Counsel, and Centralized Services Division Administrator. This is the same increase to be received by all staff in classified positions by House Bill 175 passed during the 2019 legislative session. Staff recommends approval, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Ms. Hinman. Vice Chairman Lake.
Chairman, I would move we follow staff's recommendation to approve it.
Is there a second? Been moved and seconded. We adopt staff recommendation in this docket. Discussion of the motion. Hearing none, call the question on the motion. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hinman. Work session item number 3 in docket 2019.06.032, Energy West Montana. Mr. Decker.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. This is The docket, as introduced by Chairman Johnson, it's Energy West's annual reconciliation of its USB programs. USB meaning Universal System Benefits, and as provided by Energy West in their Great Falls and West Yellowstone divisions associated with their natural gas service in those two areas. I'll introduce this work session topic, but first I observe that Robin and Zach and I have been around the block on this topic for a couple of years, as most of you have. And we also welcome now to this USB team Ashley, who is picking up speed quickly. After I finish this brief introduction, the three of us will be ready to discuss any questions with you. A bit of background. In 2017, the Commission, began a process to better review and oversee Energy West's USB programs. In the 2 compliance years since then, by the way, a compliance year ends on March 31st of each year, at which time Energy West is expected to and generally does submit a compliance filing describing their programs, expenditures, collections, etc. In these recent 2 years, you have caused these things to happen. You've conducted annual reviews of Energy West USB practices in Great Falls and West Yellowstone. You discontinued some non-functioning USB programs in the Great Falls. You established a 2-part USB charge in order to address an over-collection balance, especially held in the Great Falls USB account. You directed Energy West to obtain a third-party review of the effectiveness of its USB programs. And you dealt with most questions regarding Energy West's USB operation in West Yellowstone in a separate docket. And in that West Yellowstone docket, you'll recall that you approved a stipulated agreement between Energy West and the Montana Consumer Council for how to proceed with West Yellowstone's programs and budget. So in the current application, Energy West is requesting your approval of these things: reconciliation of its USB accounts in Great Falls and West Yellowstone divisions, that is, review and requested approval of their accounts for the most part. for Energy West in its next annual filing to fully explain how Tetra Tech's recommendations were reviewed and acted upon. And as our staff memo indicates, we expect recommendation by recommendation detail, thoughts, actions, schedules, timelines. Next, we recognize that one of the things you required last year was a reimbursement of $31,000 from Great Falls to West Yellowstone. That was an amount held in Great Falls, paid by their customers. That transfer was made. No recommendation necessary, but your directive on that topic was executed. Finally, we recommend that you approve the West Yellowstone USB charge and the associated expenditures for the next year of $81,000 as proposed by Energy West. Before I open to your questions, I'd ask Zach and Robin to add anything that I might have omitted. Thank you. Thanks, Mr. Chairman.
Prior to the motion, I have a question, Mr. Chairman. It's very important. Bob, you said that the 357 is now 387, but right up above that, you said approve the USB ongoing as proposed by EWM. So does number one take into account the increase of number two?
Yes, that's a.
Okay.
Yes, I should have mentioned that the charges did fully incorporate the one-time payment. They're based on it. They include it. They won't change.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I
And
move
just
that-
so you all know, I'm on the line too.
Oh, great.
You hear me?
Wonderful.
Yes, sir.
Good.
Good.
Yes, sir, we can.
All right. And I do have some questions, but I'll wait for others first.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to move that we accept staff recommendations.
Second.
Commissioner Koopman.
Yeah, I guess I'm moving isn't saying anything, so I'll speak next. Yeah, thanks, Bob and Zach and Robin for a very good memo and good explanation here. And excuse me if I'm a little loopy. They've been dumping a bunch of pills down my throat for the last day, and I'm not sure I'm all there, but I'll do my best. Okay. I guess my first question was why were there such high over collected amounts? Specifically, I'm looking at West Yellowstone, 123,000 and something. How in a town that size, how did it happen that they over collected that much?
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Koopman, there's a couple elements to an answer to that question. One is the long story, and that is that West Yellowstone had one single, for many years, West Yellowstone had one single USB program, and that was the no-interest loan.
Leave the jurisdictional question right where it is because we have jurisdiction if it's ETC funds, and then get the horse ahead of the cart here again and do that audit, go from there.
Could I do a clarification? I think it's important here.
Commissioner O'Donnell, hold.
So I think there's, Chairman Johnson, Commissioner Koopman, I think I understand, and I do think we are saying similar things. And that's that our motion is to retain the jurisdictional statement.
Right.
However, we have no factual evidence to indicate that Northern engaged in abuse. We have allegations provided to us by a member. So we're not finding in any sense whatsoever that Northern has abused federal universal service funds. Rather, this on-site audit is to develop some of that support to support that conclusion. Is that consistent with your understanding, Commissioner Koopman?
Yeah, and again, my thought on this is, let's not say anything in asserting jurisdiction over subject matter that involves ETC money, with asserting jurisdiction in this case until we know that, that ETC funds are involved. So we're not doing anything to weaken our position on the question of jurisdiction, but we're saying we're not going to claim jurisdiction until we know that there's ETC funds involved, and then we'll go from there. That's why I'd prefer to see the order written. It's a fine point, but I think it's an important one.
Chairman Johnson, Commissioner Koopman, I was with you, and then now I'm not. The reason I'm not is we don't have any authority to conduct an on-site audit if we don't assert jurisdiction to do so. So this is kind of like, I understand your hesitation about asserting jurisdiction, but without that, we don't have a hook to actually investigate. But I would note that this motion does not require any further commission action besides this on-site audit. At a later date, then we can bring back information to you, and then you guys can decide whether you want to dismiss the investigation because there's just nothing there, or if there is something there, decide whether the commission needs to run with it for a little bit more process, or kick it to the feds, either USAC or NECA or the FCC, if we believe there's some merit to the allegations.
Mr. Chairman, based on that, and we're kind of in a bit of a corner on this, I would support the motion as is, as long as, as long as it's, if we do write it, so we wouldn't even need to write an order, is that right, Zach? Mr. Chairman, Zach?
Chairman Johnson, Commissioner Koopman, I think we would issue a revised order to compel responses that we issued in August, where we would retain the jurisdictional language, but we would clarify, we would reconsider our direction to require production of information and replace that with an on-site audit. So we'd keep the same topics, we'd keep the same jurisdictional statement, but they're not giving us any information to the PSC. Rather, we're driving up there to go conduct a confidential on-site audit.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I guess that's the best we can do, Mr. Chairman. Zach, the way that's written is kind of important, but I think that's the best we can do under the circumstances. I support the motion.
Thank you, Commissioner Koopman. Commissioner O'Donnell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The clarification that I thought was important and still do is that Commissioner Koopman said that we had jurisdiction over ETC funds, and I think that that is incorrect. We do not have jurisdiction over how they spend the funds, but we do conversely have an obligation to make sure that they have not misspent any of the funds. So it's not the same thing. They're related, but they're not the same things. Again, as Commissioner Koopman pointed out, it's a small wording change, but I think it's very important. And I wanted to point out, that this is a very complex issue. On the one hand, we do not regulate telephone cooperatives for anything besides initial and ongoing ETC certification for federal universal service funds. And I don't think anybody here in this office wants to have any jurisdiction over those telephone cooperatives. On the other hand, we have to certify to the FCC each year that all the ETCs, including telephone cooperatives, has spent their funds according to FCC regulations. I really am sensitive to Northern's concerns. However, the Commission must investigate allegations of abuse when brought to them, as specifically imposed on us by the FCC. That's why I support this motion with the caveat that after this initial on-site audit, the Commission examine what staff has found At that point, either forward the results of the audit to the FCC or other appropriate entities or dismiss the investigation. But I would also think it's very important to point out that any audit be strictly limited to following federal funds. In no way, I don't think this commission should be looking at anything having to do with the collection, disbursement, whatever, of any member funds. We should not take extra care to not go beyond our FCC mandate to determine if federal funds have been misspent, Mr. Chairman.
Vice Chairman Lake.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a comment, if I may. There is as in all issues that become very sticky, there's a lesson to be learned. And I think the lesson we have here is that somewhere we need to determine how to get the information needed so we can fulfill our promise to the feds of making sure when we sign our name on the bottom of that application that they have followed the rules as well as spent the money and had the build out according to the contract that they have. That's the understanding I have, and I support the motion as it is, but I think coming out of this, we need to start working on developing a method of assuring to us to a level that we can sign in good faith that the funds have been spent right and the build out is being accomplished. That's more of a statement than it is anything else, but I think that we need to use that so we do not get tangled up in this thing again as far as jurisdictional.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion to amend the motion to specifically, as I pointed out, but I think it's important to have it in the motion, that the audit be strictly limited to following federal dollars and to determine any misappropriation of those funds.
Is there a second to the motion? Is there a second to the motion? Hearing none, motion dies for lack of a second. We are back to discussion of the main motion. Is there further discussion of the main motion? Let me just very quickly say that the purpose here, no one is more frustrated than I am with the manner in which our role in certification of ETCs has been defined by the federal government. And I think it is clearly an issue we need to visit going forward, but the issue before us today is fixing an order that was issued by this commission previously, and I think we have, in fact, moved to the point where we can do that, and I would just simply remind commissioners that the idea of the on-site audit was actually proffered by the party in a previous meeting proceeding before this commission. So I think we're on solid ground moving forward with the recommendation that is articulated in the motion. So if there's no further discussion, call the question on the motion. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carries unanimously. Thank you, gentlemen. Moving on now to docket 2015.10.082 Wettington Water. Mr. Rogala.
Thank you, Chairman Johnson. Commissioners, the topic of this work session is the vending machine where you put in $1 and then the thing comes, it tries to like give you your bag of chips, but then the chips never fall. And so then you put in another $1 and it still didn't fall. That's where I believe we are with Weddington Water, because we have reached out to Weddington several times over the last 2-year period to address their stale standard rates and their service quality concerns, but we haven't had sufficient response from Weddington. The purpose of today's work session is to provide a final opportunity for Weddington to respond to the Commission's order to compel responses by providing them 30 days from the issuance of a notice of Commission action to indicate how it will update its standard rates and respond to the service quality concerns we have indicated to Weddington. And if it does not respond within 30 days, that the commission will pursue some sort of remedial action against the water utility to be determined by the commission at that time. Additionally, after having discussions with several here at the commission, that it'd be helpful to have this order served with a process server upon the utility, because there's been some lost communications along the way. So this will guarantee that the notice is given to the operators, but more importantly, that we have a meet and confer requirement in the notice of commission action, so that we're having a meeting of the minds with the utility and the commission prior to them responding, so they feel they have a good understanding of what the process entails and can discuss with us, so that we're trying to kind of meet them halfway on this issue, because we understand that sometimes operating a utility is a complex endeavor and you need some onboarding in that process. So staff is available for any questions.
All right, I am going to offer the motion that we approve staff recommendation in this docket. I think it is extremely important and that we take a strong proactive stance here, and it's the two elements, that is the order served by a process server and the requirement that there be the meet and confer element within the order. Both are crucial, and I think that's the only way that we're going to effectively communicate to the operators of Weddington Water the gravity of the situation, and to articulate to them what alternatives are available to them. So I feel very strongly that that's the direction we should go. So that's the motion I will offer. Is there a second? Been moved and seconded, and we approve staff recommendation in this docket. Discussion of the motion, I really don't have anything further to say.
I think you said
Mr. Chairman, I guess
Commissioner Koopman.
next. I don't have a lot to say either, but I think Zach, you made the point in one of your letters to emails to the commission that there are a variety of possible solutions. For example, I thought it was novel and maybe quite good to require the current owners and operators to become owners only, and the commission require that an operator be put in place. I suspect that would raise rates, and that wouldn't be such a great thing. But it was an interesting concept. So yeah, I did note also, Zach, that you mentioned that you feel that there are potentially a lot of extenuating circumstances. They might have financial problems. They might, they might be overwhelmed. I think you said confused with commission processes and so forth. And so you gave a little bit of wiggle room there. And yeah, I can understand people avoid sending in their tax returns too, because it's like keep putting it aside because it's something with the government that they really don't want to deal with. They always have something more important that takes priority. So I don't know, Zach. I guess I'm just asking with regard to this motion. If there's if we're being too forceful here, if there's some kind of lesser path at this point. I say that with hesitation because I am not impressed with the way they've ignored us over the last couple of years. I'm not impressed with that at all. And we need to stand for our processes, or everyone's going to be doing this to us. But any other recommendations, Zach, of other ways to approach this?
Chairman Johnson, Commissioner Koopman, I think this is a novel issue before the commission, because typically when we have a utility or a garbage company or another regulated entity out of compliance with commission orders. We issue an order to compel responses. We discuss the issues with the party, and the issue gets resolved. Very infrequently do we take that approach, and then the issue isn't resolved, and then the commission is left with some sort of remedy that it must pursue against the party. The most recent one that comes to mind is Abaco's failure to file rate cases with the commission, where we ended up filing a administrative penalties lawsuit against the utility. I just think that type of approach here would be a little bit too heavy-handed, because we're not dealing with a large or larger propane utility. We're dealing with a small water utility. And our goal here is to ensure reasonable rates and a reasonable rate of return so that these water customers get the service they need and the water owner gets the profit that they deserve. So hopefully this 30-day grace period will help us move towards that approach without having to take any of these more heavy-handed remedies. Commissioner Goodman, I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, Zach, yeah, I think so. You had initially recommended that after 30 days that we force a sale to the utility or initiate a lawsuit with administrative penalties. And I guess that what you're saying here is that's not going to be written into this order at the current time. It's basically just the 30 days to get their act together and go from there.
Commissioner Koopman, the motion, or at least the intent of the motion, is to make sure that staff during that meet and confer period make clear to Weddington Water not only the gravity of the situation, but the range of alternatives that might well be available to them in order to remedy the situation. My goal here is absolutely to fix the situation, and I would like to think that we've hit a good balance with between the stick and carrot kind of approach here, but we're certainly not going down there to mandate a particular solution be implemented until we've had that meaningful meet and confer process take place.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, I'm comfortable with that. I'll support the motion.
Is there further discussion in the motion? Hearing none, call the question on the motion. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carries unanimously. And with no further business to come before this commission, we are adjourned. Thank you all very much.